Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome to the conversation, the Maiden edition. Our distinguished President and Chairman of Council, Mr. Bode Ayeku, FCIS. Good morning, sir. And our Vice President, Mr. Taiwo Kalade, FCIS. Our distinguished council members who are on this call, I welcome you. Our esteemed guest, Mr. Olusegun Aganga, CON. We are delighted to have you on this maiden edition of the conversation. There are members of the Institute and other non-members who have joined us on the conversation today. I also welcome you. Gentlemen of the press, I recognize you. Let me actually welcome you to the maiden edition of the conversation. The conversation is a new advocacy program of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria. It is a program centered around advocacy and good governance and contemporary national issues. To moderate this event today is no other person than that esteemed gentleman, Dr. Waheed Olagunju. Dr. Olagunju is a member of our institute, whose pedigree we all know. He retired from the Bank of Industry in April 2019 after a distinguished career that spanned almost 29 years. Under Dr. Olagunju's watch, between 2016 and 2017, the Bank of Industry recorded remarkable improvements that culminated in its rating by the international and domestic rating agencies, being upgraded and affirmed by 2016. Dr. Olagunju bagged his first and second degrees from the University of Lagos in 1981 and 1984, respectively, as well as a doctorate degree in business administration from the Paris School of Business in 2017. Prior to joining the NIDB in 1990, Dr. Olagunju worked with Nigerian Television Authority between July 1981 and July 1990. Is NYSC inclusive? He rose to become controller of news and head of economy desk by 1989. I'm sure we would see that being brought to play today as he moderates the conversation. After his twin-strap careers in broadcasting and development banking, Dr. Olagunju floated WVL Development Advisors Limited in 2019, which is a development advisory outfit to enable him continue deploying his vast experience, knowledge, and expertise to public and private sector leaders across Africa, as well as the international development community. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the moderator of today's conversation, Dr. Waheed Olagunju. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, thank you very much, our registrar, our esteemed registrar and chief executive of the Institute, for your very generous comments and introduction. Before we go into the conversation, we need to also introduce the president of the Institute, who I believe would preside over today's event. He's Mr. Bode Ayeku. He's leading the Institute very well, and this is happening at a time when we're transiting from the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria to the Governance Institute of Nigeria. Mr. President, I believe the floor is yours according to the program before I introduce Mr. Aganga.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Olagunju. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Specifically, let me also thank Mr. Olusegun Aganga, CON, for accepting our invitation today. For the participants, I think it is necessary to also provide brief information about the Institute. The Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria is an offshoot of the international body, that is the Institute of Chartered Secretaries in the United Kingdom, which was established in 1891 and got its charter in 1902. So you have an idea that we are not new, it's a global body. And the Institute in Nigeria actually started informally in 1944, when some of the members, Nigerians who finished their educational programs outside the country, returned home and decided to form something like an association of charter secretaries and administrators. However, we elected our first president in 1966, and we thereafter obtained a charter in Nigeria in 1991. So it should be noted that we are not an association, we are not just a club, we are a professional body established by Act of Parliament and also recognized in other legislation in the country. For example, we are on the board of the Corporate Affairs Commission. I'm very sure that Mr. Ganga, since he's presided over the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, knows about that. And our members are recognized under the Companies and Allied Matters Act 1990 and the new Act, Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020. So we've been on ground, and as a professional institute, we contribute our quota to the development of the economy. What we do basically is to look at issues of interest to governance and also the business community. And that is why we have been having series of engagements with relevant regulatory agencies in the country, like the Corporate Affairs Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, to discuss with them areas of interest. Where we expect them to play a greater role, where we expect them to have flexibility in order to prepare the economy. And just this year alone, we've had an engagement with the Corporate Affairs Commission on the topical issue relating to the decision of the Corporate Affairs Commission that all existing companies must issue their unissued share latest by June this month. And when we got information from stakeholders that this will not be practicable, we had this engagement with them, and graciously at that particular engagement platform, the Corporate Affairs Commission promised to do something to grant an extension, and that has now been formalized. They've released the circular, they've published in newspapers that all companies have been given a moratorium of 2 years to comply with that. In addition to that, just in April, we had another engagement with the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria on the audit regulations they released. We have some gray areas based on information we received from stakeholders, and we also have very fruitful engagements with plans on what to do to make these rules workable and also prosperous in terms of assisting the business community. So your stakeholders also are aware that last year we stepped in when there was lockdown at the onset of COVID, and the AGMs could not be held by many companies to bring Corporate Affairs Commission, Securities and Exchange Commission, Nigerian Stock Exchange, and investors together. And we were able to work out an arrangement that facilitated the AGMs of companies. So we are doing this in respect of the effect of the regulations or policies of government on the business community. However, our activities are not limited to the private sector. We are also conscious of the fact that there are challenges in the economy presently. We don't need to be told. On a daily basis, we have issues being raised. The challenges in the economy also is leading to insecurity, and the insecurity we are witnessing in the country is leading to governance challenges. And as a result of this, as an institute, With the support of our committee, the Publicity and Advocacy Committee, we are coming up with this particular initiative, which is called the platform, whereby we have a frank discussion or conversation on issues affecting the nation. We are talking of economy, we are talking of insecurity, we are talking of governance challenges, and we are hearing agitations left, right, and center. And that is why an institute like the Institute of Charter Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, we have decided to also be an active player and active participant in finding solutions to this problem. And if you look at the three areas we've talked about, economy, insecurity, governance, that forms a part of this theme. If you look at the theme of this particular conversation, national planning, economy, and governance, and national economic growth. These three concepts, they are interrelated. One may look at them and say they are standing alone. No, they are related in the sense that when you have a solid national planning in place and you are in a position to put governance behind it, and in such a way that you implement what you have planned, it will definitely lead to economic prosperity. However, if there is no proper planning, or if you have planning but did not put governance behind the planning, then it will lead to economic challenges. And that is why we are having this particular discussion today. I recall in my days when I was doing my advanced level in the early 80s, I offered economics as a course. And we have economics 2, which deals with macroeconomy. And that economics 2, we discover we actually studied a lot of national plans that Nigeria had in those days. Several plans, and there were reasons behind those plans. And I don't know what has happened, but there is still room for improvement. You will observe that if you travel around the country today, there are a lot of projects initiated in the Second Republic. I'm not talking of the Third or the Fourth Republic. During the regime of President Shehu Shagari, that are yet to be completed today. I don't think those were envisaged by those who put in place the national rolling plans in those days. So there is the need for us to go back to the basis to ensure that we connect these key concepts together, that we put in place strong national planning that is future forward-looking, that is realistic, and that has to be implemented by successive government, not a government coming to play to say this is our own policy. We have one country, and we must run it as such. And that is the reason why we are looking at this three concepts. And as an institute, we are not interested in talking about the challenges. We are interested in talking about the solutions. And that is why the rider to the team today is about what? Charting the road for the future. So we have identified that these three concepts are very important: national planning, governance, and economic growth. And we must ensure that we put them in place. We have solid national planning, we have governance behind it in order to guarantee prosperity. If we're able to guarantee economic prosperity, insecurity will disappear. In my view, it is because of the challenges in the economy that we are having the spate of insecurity that we are witnessing presently. So it's just a matter of propelling the economy again, so that the economy can be stable and can be prosperous, and then the relevant stakeholders will have something to do so that this insecurity will become a thing of the past. And the good thing is that because we are interested in solution, we have identified a person who can actually speak on this topic, who is not only qualified based on paper qualification, but a practitioner. And the good thing about our guest speaker today, or the speaker today, is that he has worked both in the private and the public sector. So he will not be talking to us based on theory. He has the privilege of leading key ministries in this country: Finance, Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. These are key ministries to the development and prosperity of any economy. And apart from that, before he started this public assignment, he was in the private sector. He's now in the private sector. So he will be able to let us know from a sweat of experience how the country can actually navigate these challenges so that we can record the desired successes. He's a silent achiever, very quiet, humble person, but very cerebral, and is somebody that will be glad that to listen to, and I urge all our participants to do that. The good thing is that the moderator also, he has been in the private sector, interfacing with the public, also at least managing a private sector that was bankrupt by the government. So he has an understanding of what the government can do better, what the private sector will need from the government, and will be in a position to put the right questions to the guests today, so that we will be in a position to provide solutions. As I said, as an institute, our major interest is in finding solutions to challenges. We are not interested in talking about challenges alone. We're interested in solutions, and I'm very comfortable that we'll do that as we progress. I know the moderator will handle that, but just to tell our participants, as the conversation is progressing, please put your questions in the chat box to be picked, so that our guests will be in a position to assist us. Let me especially thank this committee for coming up with this new program. Yes, no, whenever there are challenges, there are hidden opportunities. The challenges that the country is currently facing is the reason for this. So we have to come up with a program that will be in the position to address those challenges. So I thank the members of the Publicity and Advocacy Committee, led by Mrs. Linda Onafili and also Dr. Wahid Olagunju, for coming up with this initiative. And I know at the end of the day, we'll come up with something that will be available to the government, so that they can consider. The good thing is that the constitutional review is ongoing. If there is anything that can be incorporated, so that we make it standard, because there is no reason why a rolling plan should not be implemented by successive government if it requires constitutional provision to make it binding on future governments, so that we just avoid wasting resources on abandoned projects. I think it's something this institute will not hesitate to do, to forward our written proposals to the government, so that it can also be incorporated in the constitutional review if that becomes necessary, or to relevant government agencies and the government. And I know at the end of the day, it will be something that will be beneficial to all stakeholders. So it's on that note that I will yield the floor to our able moderator to proceed with this particular program. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, our dear President, a detailed introduction into this program. Because we have 40 minutes precisely to discuss with our distinguished guests, so we'll take a deep dive into the topic that we're supposed to be analyzing today. But before we do so, just as you heard the President say, our guest was the Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for 5 years, between 2010 and 2015, during which she was Finance Minister and head of the Economic Management team, and subsequently he became the Pioneer Minister of the ministry that I believe should be one of the most important ministries in any country, which is the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. He actually restructured the hitherto Ministry of Industry and Commerce into Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. And that speaks to his qualities as someone who's quite visionary and has a knack for planning and implementing programs. He clearly stands out as one of the finest ministers Nigeria has had, according to some analysts, and he's widely acclaimed to have been responsible for many transformational milestones, including establishing Nigeria's sovereign wealth fund and issuing Nigeria's first Eurobond. While serving as Nigeria's finance minister, he was chairman of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund in 2010 and 2011. And as Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, he chaired the 8th ministerial meeting of the World Trade Organization in Geneva, that's the WTO, making him the first African to chair the two organizations. He is a chartered accountant with more than 40 years experience. And like you heard the president say, hitherto, he was managing director of Goldman Sachs and a senior director with Ernst & Young, all in the United Kingdom, where he's currently an advisory board member of the Queen's Commonwealth Trust. Mr. Aganga, who is an awardee of the Commander of the Order of the Niger, also advises many companies and governments in the United Kingdom, the United States of America, and Nigeria. He holds degrees from the University of Ibadan and Oxford University. So clearly, he's in a very good position to competently lead our discussion today. Mr. Aganga, you are welcome to the conversation. And we're looking forward to tapping from your wealth of experience over the last 4 decades, domestically and internationally in the public and private sector. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very delighted to be here today, and I look forward to the conversation.
Well, for full disclosure and for transparency's sake, I mean, I was the former acting managing director of the Bank of Industry, one of the institutions supervised by our guest today while he was Minister of Industry and Investment. So I can competently describe myself as one of his mentees. He's one of my mentors and benefactor, I must say so. So going straight to our conversation today, clearly we are all not happy that after 60 years of independence, we are still where we are today, development-wise. The government is thinking of lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty over the next 9 years or so by 2030, which also happens to be the decade of action that has been declared by the United Nations, talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. We hope that poverty will be ended globally by 2030. But talking about Nigeria specifically, before we talk about charting the way forward, how did we get here? You know, it's important for us to know how we got here, where we are now, before we start talking of the solutions and the way forward. From where you stand, how did we get here, please?
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is a very important, relevant question. By the way, let me start by congratulating the Institute for having this conversation. And as I said, I'm even far more excited that you're looking at transitioning from the Charter Secretary Institute to the Institute of Governance. And if, as I said, if you do that extremely well, you will see that that will be one of the major game changers in this country, in Nigeria. So I encourage you, and I think you are on the right path. And as I said, it's one of the reasons why I'm here today. Now, back to your question, Wahid. Now, Nigeria, I spent years going around marketing the country all over the world. I went to 68 different countries when I was in government. So I always have difficulty only talking about the problems without at least acknowledging some of the things we've done well. So let me start by saying that over that 60 years, at least we have become the first economy in Africa. And I want to say that there have been isolated successes in the areas of sector areas like cement, where we have had about 8 billion investment gone into it, 1.6 million jobs created as a result of that. As of Q1, if you look at Q1 numbers, it added about it grew by about 11.1%. It is one of the sectors driving the non-oil growth in Q1 that drove the growth in non-oil growth in Q1. We're going to have one of the largest single train refineries in 2020, hopefully next year. We've had some successes in cement, in rice, and the others. However, when you look at it on a relative basis and look at the economic indicators, we're not where we want to be. And that's your question, really. We're not where we want to be. We're not there. If you look at revenue-wise, for example, it's still not diversified. It's still 90% plus foreign income comes from one source, oil, and 70% of total income plus comes from one source. So we have not been diversified. The revenue has not been diversified. When you look at the quality of the revenue, it's very poor in the sense that it is sensitive, is driven by oil price volatility. And therefore, you saw what happened, or what has happened in the last 2-3 years with the fall in oil prices and all that. And when you look at the size of the revenue, it is very small. If you look at, let's say, the debt to GDP ratio today, or the debt to income ratio today, our debt servicing to revenue today is about more than 83%. In 2020, it was 83%, so it's more than 83%. When you compare that to United Kingdom, United Kingdom has a big debt. It's the debt servicing to national income is only 1.9%. It represents only 4.9% of the total expenditure. Now, when I was Minister of Finance, total expenditure was almost about 80-something%. Now, I was trying to bring that down to 60%. Now, imagine that only debt servicing to revenue is about 83%. That tells you we're not in a good place at all. When you look at the GDP to per capita, we only have this, our GDP per capita is only 19% of the average income, of the average worldwide, while South Africa has about 58% of that average of what the GDP per capita world will be. And of course, you know about the level of unemployment, and you know about the poverty level. It is 87 million absolute poor, extremely poor Nigerians, which accounts for about 41% of our people. So that tells you we are not where we want to be, and we're not proud of where we are. And the question you're asking is, why are we here? And I would just say there are macro and micro points, and I'll talk about them quickly. We can expand on them later. On the macro level, it's all about institutions. It's all about governance, and it's all about leadership. No, whoever you talk to, those three words will come. It's either the institutions, or someone talk about governance, someone talk about we'll talk about leadership. Well, they're all related. I would explain how they are related later. But on the micro level, it is down to poor development and implementation of national plan. It is down to the fact that we failed for a very long time, more than 50 years, to realize that having resources in the ground, finite resources that, are wasting assets, it does not make you rich as a nation. Having oil in the ground, having solid minerals in the ground, 24 solid minerals, does not make you rich. What makes you rich is what you do with them, the value addition to it. And we're still struggling with that. And that's what we diversify the economy. The other thing is about the uncontrolled population growth. It's a big problem, because if you have the same source of revenue and you're still dividing it amongst, if it's amongst 5 people, it may be okay. But if you're dividing it amongst 50, 20 people, that revenue becomes so small. So if I give you an example, United Kingdom, for example, in 1960, the population was about 52 million. Nigeria was 46 million. So the UK had more people, 52 million compared to Nigeria, 42 million. Fast track, by 2015, UK has 65 million, Nigeria 181 million. By 2030, UK will have 70 million people. That's a growth of 31% or 35% from 1960. compared to Nigeria, Nigeria will be 263 million people. That's a growth of more than 472%. And yet your economy is not expanding, it's not growing. You will remain a poor nation forever because of that, the combination, uncontrolled growth in population and not enough effort to make that cake bigger, much, much bigger. So that we need a bigger cake, and we need to think about the uncontrolled population growth. And of course, the other point I want to make is the loss of our values. I always, there's nothing I talk about that I don't bring in the values. Someone was making an example and said, look, you complain about the National Assembly members, you complain about legislators now about that. If you take them away and pick the same, on a random basis, pick 200 people from the public, you still have the same quality of people. Our value system in those days where we recognize hard work, discipline, patriotism, compassion, and all that, dedication, honesty, integrity. That was the tradition you and I grew in. We don't have that anymore. If you look at Japan, Japan tried to inculcate it in their citizens right from the age of 6. You must rebuild your society. Otherwise, you do not have the people to deliver on all those things. Governance is not just about just a structure. It's also ethical. You need some ethical principles guiding your governance structure. And if you don't have people who have good values, you will not have ethical people to run that governance structure which you have in place. So that is critical. The final thing is about the political system we run today. The political system we have today is not, the politicians are not accountable to the electorate. And it doesn't matter what they do, whoever is going to win is going to win. So, and the reason why that is the case is that Nigeria, now when you look at democracies, even like the Economics Institute Democracy Index, there are 4 classes. You have the authoritarian regimes, you have the hybrid regimes, you have the flawed democracy, and you have the full democracy. Nigeria has remained a hybrid regime. It's not even described as a democracy. And when you look at the attributes of a hybrid regime, it tells you all those things that people were complaining about that we still have today. And then you have a situation where people get into government, there is no continuity of policy. There's no continuity of plans. Everyone comes with a new plan. How many agri plans have we had in the country? How many, you talked about the national planning, how many have we had? Lack of discipline. And everyone comes, and nobody's holding anybody accountable. And when you do that, the limited resources you have, you waste it so much. So there's so much waste. It's not just about corruption. There are leakages all across the system. So we must understand how all these things are interlinked and how they lead to poverty and what we need to do. So sorry, Wahid, if I took more time, but I just thought I should identify those issues. There are more issues, but let me pick those 5 issues as a reason why we're where we are.
Thank you very much, sir. You covered a lot of areas that I wanted to ask you about. I'll pick out leadership because the quality of governance will also to a large extent depend on the kind of leaders you have at all levels now. As the former US Secretary of State, Mrs. Hillary Clinton pointed out in 2009 when she visited Nigeria, that we're still where we are, or we were still where we were at that time, due to governance failures at all levels, local government, state, and federal, since independence. I also know that before you got into government, you established the Nigerian Leadership Initiative, which means that this is an issue that you've been passionate about over the years. Like our institute's president did say, this program is all about finding solutions, charting the way forward. You've taken us through how we got here. Now, how do we get out of here such that perhaps by 2030, like McKinsey is projecting, we want there to be among the top 20 economies in the world by 2020. Goldman Sachs, your former bank, made that projection some time ago. We've missed the boat of 2020. So by 2030, we're thinking of becoming to being among the top 20 economies in the world, with probably a GDP of 1.6 trillion, right? And growing at about 7% per annum, you know, between now and 2030. How can we achieve this?
Well, we can achieve this through a combination of factors. But let me first of all explain the interrelations or the relationships between that leadership, governance, and institution. Even Kofi Annan, in one of his speeches, said the most important factor, governance, good governance, is the most important factor that any country needs to eliminate poverty and to promote development. And if you have read the book on why nations fail, you will see that Darren and James Robinson said nations, there's one thing that is common amongst all failed nations, and it is extractive, weak institutions. So those three things, whether leadership, governance, and
weak
institutions, they're all tied. So a competent, good, visionary leader with core values. I repeat, a competent, visionary leader with core values will ensure that there is good governance. Will lead to ensure that it's good governance. When you have good governance, to achieve that good governance, the structure you put in place are the institutions, the political or democratic institutions, the economic institutions, and the social institutions. That is how they work. So when you have poor leaders or the wrong leaders, leaders that are not competent, visionary, and do not have the right values, you will not have good governance. And that means that political structures determine the economic institutions. That means you will have extractive economic institutions that will only work for the political class, not for the people. Right? So and what do you mean by that? When you have when politicians talk, they say the dividend of democracy is sharing positions, allocating offices to people and all that. So when people get positions, that is not the dividend of democracy. The dividend of democracy is good governance, which every Nigerian, everyone should benefit from. So unless the people, Nigerians, will understand that relationship, that it starts, going back to your question, it starts with the leadership, that you need competent, visionary leaders with core values, which means that you must consider in just your election. When you have those people in place, they will ensure that there's good governance, and then the sort of institutions they have, whether it's political, economic, or social, will be inclusive and will be sort that works for the country. We have the institutions. As I always say on planning, we are long on plans. We have plans and good plans. We have good policies. What we don't do is we don't implement them, and the quality of implementation is so poor, and there's no continuity. It's not there's no shortage of plans and all that. So if you go back to the leadership, which is your question, we have always said we don't have the right leaders. And I think I've said that too, but I'm beginning to think that actually it's not that we don't have the right leaders. We need to do more to have leaders who have core values, values-based leaders. And we have to change that right from primary school, secondary school, university. We need to have leadership institutes, finishing schools for people leaving the university where you teach them about leadership and values. So you need to have a system in place that will produce them in greater numbers. That said, we still do have some in the system, but the problem is that those we have in the system are not attracted to the political structure you have today. Your best people do not go into politics because it's not attractive to, and why is it not attractive to them? Because the political institutions you have are weak and you do not have proper democracy. So the Economic Institute describes Nigeria as hybrid regime. And when you say, what is hybrid regime? I listed them down. You say a hybrid regime, the characteristics they have is regular electoral fraud, non-independent judiciary, widespread corruption, anemic rule of law, poor governance, weak political institutions, and weak oppositions. So if we want to move, we're not a democracy yet. If we want to move from that hybrid regime to a flawed democracy, these are things we need to have in place. So that's the next action point for how we build. Then we move into the institutions. We cannot go anywhere. The institutions are there to make the laws. They're there to implement the laws and all that. BOI was an institution. And you have institutions at federal, state, and government levels. And each one of them need to have good governance. And the only way you can do that is if they are inclusive, which means that you are also, if you appoint competent people there based on merit. The moment federal character is excellent, but federal character can be implemented with meritocracy. There's no point. If you put the wrong person there, you will not get the right result in the agency. The agency will be there, BOI will be there, for example, and say, this is what the mandate is what your mandate is. It doesn't, you have mandate drift. There's somebody supervising, there's somebody checking, there's somebody, no oversight structure. So the governance structure it's not working or something. And then you have to have code of conduct for members of the board, what they can do, cannot do. If you have those things in place, it will work. Now, I then move on to the fact that it's one of the reasons why I was so excited in 2013 to launch the committee that actually produced the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance. I actually launched that committee to do the work because I know the impact it could have on prosperity, on development, on poverty, and attracting investment into the country. It was not finalized by the time I left. It was eventually finalized and issued in 2018. What is exciting about it when we set it up was that it's not just about the private sector. It's the first time you have something for the public sector. Public sector need to embrace the Code of Corporate Governance, 100%. At the moment, we hear that they can't implement it fully because of the laws establishing some of those agencies. But this is an opportunity for your institute to work with the FRC and the National Assembly to make sure that this is implemented. It will solve a lot of our problems if we did that. So I've talked about structure, institution, leadership, and governance. But if I go more into specific area, then about what now needs to be done about the planning itself, I would say that selection of people that need to be involved in the planning process. You need to make sure that it's representative. Youth, women, the local government. By the way, if you look at the Constitution, local government are expected to make recommendations to the commission putting together the national plan. I am not sure whether they are consulted, but the Constitution requires them to do that. State level and all that. So it needs to be representative. I would suggest they consider bringing some of the former technocrat minister. They have a lot of knowledge, what they could do differently or better, or what was there. They knew all the plans that they can help with that process. I would suggest that it's co-led by the private sector. And I would suggest also that all tiers of government are involved. The second thing is about the plan. There has to be a clear vision. There has to be a clear vision which the whole country has bought into. We want to be this. For example, we want to be top 20 economy by 2020. It was a clear vision. Now, whether we did it or not is a different. You need something, a clear vision that Nigerians, everybody can be excited about and say, yes, this is where we're going. It's clear to them that this is where we're going and this is how we're going to get there. And they see it as part of their own plan. You need to make sure that the adequate resources to implement it. You do the national planning. In those days, when I was in finance, there was a problem in terms of national planning, do the planning, finance do the allocation. There's no correlation in terms of how you allocate resources. So how do they implement it? We decided when I was Minister of Finance, was okay, in our allocation process, we will involve Ministry of National Planning. The Minister of National Planning joined me at meetings with each MDA, bringing your plan to make sure that their plan is being implemented and we're putting resources into it. Maybe it will work better now that now finance, national planning are in one ministry, but you have to make sure there are resources, that you allocate adequate resources to make that happen. The other thing I want to emphasize about it is about the implementation. Again, I keep on saying that the economic institutions have to be strong with strong governance. They are the ones that determine whether it works or it doesn't work. And it must be at all levels, not at federal only. Do you know that what affects you most actually is what your local government should be doing? What determines whether you spend 1 hour between Ikoyi and Victoria Island or 7 hours between Ikoyi and Victoria Island is what your local government should be involved in. Local governments are looking at things about roads. They are looking at things about health, about vocation and all that. Now, if there is no local government, if the people appointed to chairman local government are appointed just because they are politicians, you are sharing dividends of democracy, sharing positions with people that are not, because they are members of your party, how would they deliver what you're looking for? We all will be poor. So you have to look at the 3 tiers of government and make sure that the economic institutions work and is based on merit. Now, the most important thing is about continuity. And this is where people get into government. There are no reasons why this continuity doesn't happen. People get into government and say the first thing they're looking for, what are the quick wins? What can I do quickly to get results 1 year? They ignore the plan because the plan may not deliver results in 1 year or 2 years. Secondly, your political structure is such a way that you get into government, you spend, because you don't have a strong opposition that has been that has a good understanding of the system, it takes a minimum of 1 year, if not 2, for a minister to fully understand what the agency is supposed to do. You will see that in the first year, you don't see a lot of results. Second, third year, you see them doing some work. By 3rd year, they're already working towards the next election. If it's not going to contribute to the next election, they are not interested, which means that every time they only have 2 years effectively to do anything. How can you, productivity will be low. How do you make progress as a nation if that is the basis on which people work? So you need to look at that and make sure that that is properly structured. National Assembly should be involved. I think when you have your national planning, it's now good, it's important that you make it a law that people cannot change. Now, I remember when we did the auto policy, Japan, Toyota should have come earlier. All the Nissan came, everybody came in, but Japan said, well, we're not coming in until you make that policy a law, because we know Nigerian, you can always change things. So they address that way. So national also need to play a role in making sure that the budgetary allocation, that you allocate money to those programs that already in the plan, and the plan must be and should be owned by the people. So that it's not about government. Any government can come and go, but it's owned by the people. What other countries have done, which we haven't done well, is that they tend to have what you call, there's something about called program management. Not project managers, but program managers. When you run a big program like that, you have program managers who are responsible for the monitoring, reporting, and making sure that all the timelines are met. In the UK, for example, when you get to a particular level and you're involved with a big program, Oxford University has a program on program management. They come to teach them. They prepare them for it. They are professionals. I think those are some of the things you can do to make sure that we address the issues. Again, I've talked about, so if you address this properly, then all the underlying sectorial policies you have the right institutions, your right people driving, making sure that they are done. If you look at, if I give you some sectorial policies, for example, we had the auto policy. In South Africa, the auto policy in South Africa today, as of today, is 62 years old. They have been updating the same policy, updating it every 5-10 years or thereabout. The last one they did was 2020 to 2035. But it's the same policy. You just keep on updating it, adapting it to your current situation. But you know where you are and you know where you're going. So it wasn't surprising when we were reviewing our success with AGOA, and we said, look, if you look at non-oil, what has Africa successfully exported to the United States that is non-oil? We saw that at that time when we did that review, it was only $4 billion. And out of that $4 billion, 3.85 was from South Africa. And 3.85, out of that 3.85, most of it were vehicles, parts exported from South Africa. Anybody who is into manufacturing or manufacturing components parts, they're all in South Africa. Because of that policy there, it supports a whole region. Compare that to Nigeria. The head of state, Yakubu Gowon, started it initially with Volkswagen and the others. We counseled for many, many years, putting very policies that encourage trading instead of manufacturing and whatever. I came in, putting a new auto policy in line with the Nigerian Industrial Revolution plan. We started again, all of them came back again, and suddenly you've canceled it again. How do you make progress? When you start, you can, now, you know what, it costs more than 2-3 million to put that policy in place. It took more than 6 months plus to put that policy in place. It involved heavy consultation with the private sector, with OEM providers, with people in government, people in the private sector. And then people have come believing in you as a country and brought money to invest in your country. And then you cancel the program. They've lost money. How it doesn't make sense. When you have people who have values, discipline, compassion, understanding, they will not take such decisions. When you have authentic leaders running you, they will not take such decisions because they will look at all the factors. Compare that to cement policy. Cement policy was there before I came in. I got in as normal with Nigerians. People that wanted to get in or came to complain, no, some people are favored, we want to change it, let's stop it, let's start again, let's start and sorry. I consulted with the previous ministers, which some of these people have not done. There's nothing, everything is politics. You don't need to follow. I consulted with ministers before me who set up policy. And we had it, and I decided, no, we can't keep on changing and doing this. I insisted on continuing with the policy. It was 11 million, we were producing 11 million metric tons of cement when I came in. By the time I left, we were producing 32 million metric tons of cement. By the time I left, we had stopped importing cement as a nation. We have become a net exporter of cement. Today, we're talking about investment of about $8 billion into that sector, creating jobs for about 1.6 million people, and accounting for a good size of GDP, and now part of the driver of our non-oil growth. If we didn't continue that, we will not see that such success. So it's important. It's obvious, but these are things we need to do. Right? Let me stop. There are more I could do, but let me again stop there and allow Dr. Wahid Olagunju to continue with his comments.
Well, thank you very much. Definitely, with all due respect, you're quite passionate and highly knowledgeable about this subject. It's like you, in the course of your presentation, it's like you threw the ball back into the court of the people. Because for leaders to emerge, these are choices that people have to make. And that's why some people say, you get the kind of leaders you deserve, because you end up voting those leaders into those various positions. And that also speaks to the nexus between leadership and followership. You talk about the values. It's a chicken and egg situation. For example, in contemporary Nigeria, you find out that the Nigerian government today is doing quite a lot in data infrastructure, like the railways. But then you now find some fellow Nigerians going to vandalize the rail tracks. Unfortunately and painfully, regrettably, some government officials have been caught in the act, including law enforcement agencies, officers. Now, compare that with Rwanda, where the government says no littering, for example. Government officials are not on the street to enforce the no littering thing. Everybody complies. So it's like followership is very, very important. How can we get the right kind of followership? Place a lot of emphasis on governance and leadership. But we can now see that the two depend also on the followership, the kind of societies. What can we do? I know you talk about starting from primary school, the secondary school, the universities, having all this value orientation in the curricula. These are short, medium, and long term. For us to get to perhaps the promised land in 2030, achieving substantially some of the sustainable development goals, what can we do over the next 8 years to bring about a drastic improvement in the living standards of Nigerians? Getting 100 million people out of poverty. Okay.
The people that are vandalizing some of the tracks, as you say, and all that, it can only be down to two things. And the other points you raise, one is ignorance. If they know that they're doing that, they're harming themselves and their fellow citizens, they will not do what they're doing. Most people do the wrong things because of ignorance. And the only answer to ignorance is education. You see, so and that education has to be based on values as well. So all our educational things must be based on three things: academic excellence, character formation, and spiritual insight. You should be, those are the things you should be aiming for. And if it's, when you look at our educational system, it's not delivering any of this. Together, of course, with delivering qualifications, people that are relevant to the economy. Brazil does it better, and there's a way Brazil does it, in a way that it works. There's a way other countries do it that it works for them. We don't have a way we do it yet. We don't understand. I started doing something just before I left, and nobody has picked it up again. That's all it thinks about continuity.
What was that, sir?
Now, the way, for example, when this specific about producing people and skills that are relevant to the economy, what Brazil and a lot of other countries do is that they do an annual survey, working with the private sector to say where are the skills gap in the private sector. They look at where investments are coming in and look at the sort of skills that we require. So we are saying, let's say the Dangote refinery is coming up next or whatever it is. You will say, we need X number of petroleum engineers, for example. If we need X number of whatever it is, they do that every year to find out where the skills gaps and the specific skills that are required. This is now made available to people who train people for vocational training and to universities and schools. So Ministry of Education is done by the Ministry of Industry and Investment. They all sit down and use it, and they use it to address or update the school curriculum. That is why, I don't know whether you're on a trip with me to Brazil. That is why our equivalent of ITF in Brazil, that is why when they train people, and they train them very regularly, within 3 months, 90% of them have gotten jobs or get jobs. We train them and there's no job for them because it's not relevant. So that's how you make your training program relevant to the needs of the economy. Now, I worked with UNIDO to try and put this together for the first time in the country. UNIDO worked with NBS. Unfortunately, the report was not ready before I left the country, before the administration ended. It was already after. It was not put to use the way it was supposed to put to use. I don't know what has happened to it. So these are some of the things that, we need to look at. So I was just explaining the thing about the followership and the people. And the second reason why where you don't have the followership, we have to be practical and honest with ourselves, is that there's no trust. Where there's no trust, there can't be any follow. You only follow a leader that you trust and can make you better. If not, he's not a leader. He's calling himself a leader, but he doesn't have a follower. There is no trust. And there is also, and that trust has been made worse because the people do not feel that the government is working for them. You have to say, look, why are people patriotic about their country? They are patriotic because if anything happens, they know as an American what the US will do. They know what the British will do. They know that they care about poverty. They know that they care about housing. There are 3 basic things or 4 basic things that you must have: housing, food, transportation, all those things, welfare. The welfare system works here, is provided across the board. So everybody is at least to a particular level financially independent. You know when your country is working for you. When you yourself, your own local government. It's a sad, what are you following? And everybody is trying to 419 the other. Even when you talk about there's a lot of wastage in the system. There's less money to share from the federal government. States are compelled to look for AGR. Who do they get money from? It's still from the same people who are paying taxes and all that. So everybody is feeling pain rather than getting, something from the government. So I think we just need to change our relationship. First of all, I've talked about education, investing. Our greatest asset as a nation is not petroleum. It's not a solid mineral. Our greater asset is our people. Make that your cornerstone in terms of your policy, people-oriented policies, and make sure that you invest in your people. They will return that. They will return that investment back to you. And you need them for what you need to do. So there's a breakdown in trust, and people do not feel, I don't know, right or wrongly, that the government is working for them. Let me leave it that way for now.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Well, we have perhaps less than 10 minutes to go, but in practical terms, I'm aware that while you were in government, you had to work with the state governments, you had to work with the National Assembly. We're in a federation. This speaks to the dynamics of governance in a federal system. When the Sovereign Wealth Fund was being established, there was resistance. How are you able to pull it through?
Some things I can say here, some things I can't say here. So it's not everything in government, it's not everything you're able to say publicly. But the most important thing actually is that where there's a will, there's always a way. I mean, the will was strong. We had to do it. We were one of the few countries all in the world that were producing something, one major commodity, and who for one reason do not realize that it's a wasting asset, it's going on, and we needed to save part of it and use it to diversify the economy. It's just simple. And a lot of work went into it. But I think the first thing was, first of all, there was heavy resistance. Again, part of heavy resistance is lack of trust. Because some state governments will say, look, why should federal government withhold some of my money? I need all the money in the states. They say, look, let's say for a rainy day, and the governor said, look, it's already flooding in my state. So there's nothing, leave it to me. I don't want to save. I was once saying, even if I want to save it myself, not with the federal government. So you have something. Again, it's also working together as one, as a team for the greater good of the society. It's like when you have a board of directors. The board of directors, the governance require you, and code of conduct is important. You are working for the company, not for the shareholders. For the good of the whole company. And if you work for the whole good of the company, the shareholders benefit, including the minority shareholders, not the majority shareholders. But interest of the company has to be paramount. We have to move to a situation where our interest is not, what's paramount is not our personal interest, but national interest. If we understand, if we move and get there, we'll make a lot of progress. So the first thing was to try and explain and educate the governors. I had several meetings with the governors. I had several meetings with the chairman of Governor Forum with my team. I had several meetings with the National Assembly. You look at the key stakeholders that you need to work with. Make your presentations to them. Listen to their point of view. You're not always clever. Not everyone, no one has all the knowledge. Listen to their point of view and address their concerns. So I listened. Even some state governments that were getting 13% derivation felt there was going to be an issue because of their 13%. But I spoke to all of them and made sure that I took care of all their concerns in the document we eventually produced. I think that helped a long way to getting us there. Although later they went to court. Now, the same people that went to court, I seen people that when they came to government and say, you should have done this a long time ago. You know, there's politics here and there, but it's not. There were some who were very supportive at the time, who supported, like Governor Obi, Leon Moke. Some of those people were heavy supportive because they saw it through. But I think strong will to want to get things done, consultation as much as possible, consult as much as possible, address all concerns raised as much as possible to the best of your ability. If you have a good idea, and I was privileged to have a president who was 120% supportive. I had a president that was 120% supportive, who gave me all the support I needed, and an Attorney General, Adoki, who was not only creative, but very, very smart. So I had a good team around working on it. That's how we were able to get there.
Yeah, thank you very much. I decided to raise this because right now there's a lot of disconnect between federal and state governments, between the National Assembly and some other arms of government. there is need for everybody to work together for the governance machinery to deliver true development in the country along the way. And in particular, you talked about all buying into a vision. It's very, very important that that vision is value-driven and bought into by everybody. Just as the African Charter on Popular Participation and Development talked about participatory approach to the development process, which is very, very important, whereby everybody, leadership and followership, community-based organizations, local governments, traditional institutions, state governments. So we're talking of leadership across board, not just even the politicians alone. Well, thank you very much, sir, for the exciting presentation, for the illuminating analysis.
Can I just make just 2 points, just 2 points very quickly?
Okay, sir.
One is that I was talking about the policy, whatever it is. Now, you say you want to, you sit down there, one person says, we want to industrialize, we want to increase value added. And because more than 70% of the goods traded globally all have value addition. You cannot continue, any country that relies on importing or exporting raw material will remain poor forever. The value is in value addition. Now you say you want to do that, want to industrialize. We say, yes, we can, given the population we have, given the pressure on our foreign exchange, we need an auto policy. We have investors coming in. Now we say policies say local patronage, which means that government itself, to make it happen, when we buy cars, all government institutions, including the National Assembly, they're supposed to patronize locally assembled product. But when they don't patronize it, how will it succeed? And the policy is there, and they sign into law. So you have all these people, there's a lot of disconnects, people not working together as a team to make this happen. Final word on continuity. Go and do your research. You will find that there's no developing nation in the world that has become successful without having continuity in 2 areas. Continuity in terms of one competent, visionary leader with core values leading the country for a long time, i.e. Lee Kuan Yew, i.e. Prime Minister of Malaysia, Mohammed, who was there for 22 years, i.e. what Kagame is beginning to do in Rwanda, or a party that is there that is stronger than the individual, have strong policies, have strong economic and political structure for a long period of time, like you have in China. Without that, we cannot, the individual will not emerge because we have term basis, whatever it is, 2 terms, whatever it is. But you need strong parties that are stronger than the individual, that have strong political internal democracy and stronger policies, economic policies that they are implementing for the benefit of the people, and implement it rigorously over a period of time, not chop and change, chop and change. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that intervention. This is supposed to be an interactive platform. We can't take all the questions that have been posted into the chat box. I hope you'll be kind enough, sir, if we forward some of the questions that we cannot take due to time constraints now to you, and then perhaps you can respond to them later. Then we'll make your responses available to members of the Institute who posted their questions onto into the chat box. So please, fellow members of the Institute, please try and bear with us. We're struggling to finish this program in 15 minutes time. That's about 12:30 Nigerian time, because Mr. Gaga is based in the UK and he has some other appointments. He needs to get along with the rest of the day, go on with the rest of the day. The first question has to say, you say, Dr. Ganga, you came into government with significant private sector experience and expertise. While we have significant leadership deficit in our country, how can we harness the significant private sector expertise Nigerians in the private sector have, especially those in the diaspora. You are also a diaspora. Maybe you're very comfortable responding to this question, sir.
I think that is a very, 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 very good question. And that's why I was saying earlier on that it's not about not having leaders. We have some good leaders in Nigeria. All the NSAS protesters, those young people, they're leaders. They're leaders in the diaspora. You have highly credible, successful Nigerians all over in the diaspora. The question is this: how do you use them? How do you bring them into play? And as I was saying, when I was talking about the national planning, I said representative. Diaspora was part of that. That includes some of them in the planning. They have seen how it works in another country. The relevant ones, not the hustlers. There are specialists. There are people who know what they're doing. You have a bank of people to pick from. And the interesting thing is that they want to add value. They don't have anything. They are not looking for money. They just want to make their country great because, they benefit from the sovereign goodwill. If Nigeria does well, no matter where you are in the world, you do well. They're not looking for, bring them in. There's something, I have a few other suggestions, which I may not be able to want to discuss here for one reason or the other, and because you have a number of other questions you want to ask. But the idea is involve them. Now, when we were talking about, let's say the Nigerian Industrial Revolution Plan, the NRP. The NRP is the most comprehensive plan Nigeria has ever produced for industrialization, which we all worked on, Wahid, all of us, in 2013 or thereabout. Now, we went through a rigorous process to put that plan in place. But we started with the private sector. Man produced something which we worked on to start with. When we now expanded it and made it even what we wanted it to be and involved all the sector, we took it to them again to go and present to the private sector because they are the ones that we invest in it. They're the ones that will make it happen. We had presentation with MAN. We had presentation with several individual investors, private sector. They gave us ideas, suggestions also, which we put into it before we took it to council for approval. If we went to council for approval, we put in a governance structure in place. And to make it work, all the agencies that are supposed to play a role, the first time, all the 16 agencies reporting to that economic ministry, Ministry of Industry and Investment, every ministry, every agency had a role to play in the NRP. All of them had to buy into it, had to know their role and what they're supposed to do. And we were meeting every 2 weeks to get an update from each of the CEOs on how far they have gone. We left government, the plan is that nothing has happened. So how do you move forward as a country? So the import to your question is that I've talked about how you involve the diaspora because they're keen, they want to do things, and there are other ways you can bring them, get involved. I also saw even the private sector locally, you can't sit down and make a policy without, in which country? There was some country I went to where, I remember the country, where you cannot take a policy to govern and get it done without the private sector endorsing it. You must involve them. You can't just do things, and because most of them, what do you know? The fact that you're in government doesn't mean you know everything. So let me allow you to ask other questions. Let me put it that way. There are other ways you can involve. They are eager. They're especially, look for the best people. They're all over the place in the sector, not the ones hustling to do things. Involve them. It's not out of place for the president to host. We used to host the Honorary International Investment Council. There's no reason why you can't host such a thing for some selected diaspora people. The UK Prime Minister, David Cameron, was talking the other day and said, look, one of the reasons why they've gone into advanced medical science is because there's a time, every year he calls all the scientists together and said, where's science going, and what should we be doing? And they came up with some ideas and they took them and implemented them. You need, the clever person is a person who knows how to harness the thought of others, add it to their own, and make it better. Not the person who believes I know everything.
Well, thank you. There's another question. The ongoing national debate about the imperfections of the current constitution. Do you think that the fault is in the document or its implementation? For 5 years as minister, somehow, somewhere, you are involved with implementing aspects of the constitution. What was the experience with the constitution we now have, particularly as it borders on how it can facilitate or hinder development in some areas?
I think, unfortunately, I'm not going to pick one or the other. I'm going to say both. I'm both, and there's nothing wrong in saying that there are aspects of the constitution that needs to change. That's why you have constitution review. That's why countries have constitution review. Constitution is not always a perfect document. It's a document that you can always, as long as you have easy way of getting it done. The problem we have, part of the problem we have, is that the path to making any change to our constitution is so rigorous, so difficult. If you take Switzerland, for example, Switzerland, once you have more than 100 signatories to something they want to change, or something they want to change in the constitution, and you draft it, they must have a referendum on it. And if you win it, it's changed, they move forward. They make easier. They exercise what we call direct democracy. You know, democracy has different levels. We are at the bottom of it. It has different levels, but you must get people involved. Democracy is government by the people, for the people, and of the people. So they make sure that you can make those changes very quickly. So I think that's part of that. But there's also very, very poor, bad implementation. You know, we're talking about federating units and how it should work. There should have been devolution of power. For example, I was talking about local government. You give local government a lot of good, important responsibility. That's sharing powers across the board. But you are not giving them resources to do the work they need to do. It goes to state government, and that's it. What do the local government chairmen do? Therefore, how can it work when those things that you allocate to them in the constitution, how would that work? So we are not operating it the way it was intended. We copied something from somewhere, we've taken what benefits us, taken advantage of something, and we're not implementing. There must be a way to sanction people for not implementing it the way it is being implemented. There must be a way. We must learn from what has happened and make necessary changes going forward. There are areas where there's a lot of conflict of interest, where where the political class will not take any action because there is a conflict of interest. You must have an independent party that can handle those sort of things. You have to think about, you need to have two houses, or one house is enough. We cannot afford the cost of governance we have today. How do we structure ourselves so that in a way that we can afford the cost, the governance structure we have in place? How do we make sure that the right people right people are represented? How do we make sure that our houses of National Assembly, whatever it is, are not rubber stamp houses? How do we make sure that the Senate is not rubber stamp? There's supposed to be check and balances, but it's not happening. And because of that, you don't have proper democracy. You don't have quality. The system is not working. So it's both.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, we have barely 5 minutes to go for the vote of thanks and group photograph. I might just add to that, talking about implementing the constitution, operating the constitution, an area that needs to be looked at is minerals, because we're talking about diversifying the Nigerian economy away from oil. We have huge solid minerals. 44 of them also were identified under your ministry that can be commercially exploited. Some of them can even be exported, gemstones. But then you have minerals under the exclusive list, which means that you cannot do anything about the minerals unless you get approval at the federal level, at the state government level. But then for you to access solid minerals, you need to go through the state government, because under the Land Use Act, you cannot access the land without the governor's approval.
Without the governor, yeah.
So these are like a logjam that needs to be resolved. In my days at the Bank of Industry, we approved a lot of loans that we had to cancel because the state governments, some of them for 8 years, just refused to sign certificate of occupancy or governor's consent to assignment. Because without this proper title, that's the only way the financial institution, you can prove to the financial that that landed property belongs to you. And we had to waste a lot of time going to governors, begging some of them to please sign these CFOs. And some just refused. And nothing happened. And what to cancel those loans. You can imagine the developmental impact of those investments were not realized. So those are some of the areas we think we need to look at. Well, Mr. Ganga, it's been a pleasure, as usual, listening to you. I've added a lot of knowledge. I've learned a lot from you again today, as we all do, those of us who worked with you, or who interface with you while you were in government. We remain grateful to you for impacting on us and your contributions to Nigeria's national development over the 5 years that you were Minister of the Federal Republic. And we know that you've continued making contributions to Nigeria's development, even outside outside government. We know you still have a lot of contacts within governments at different levels, and you continue to render your advice behind this. Like you said, there are a lot of things you can't say on this platform because you have access. You can always talk to people in the relevant places. The Institute, like the President said, looks forward to working more and more with you as you transit into the Governance Institute of Nigeria. Definitely, you have a lot of value to add to our institutions, our institute's operations. So on that note, we say thank you very much, sir, for the time. And I hand over to my Madam Chairman.
I want to make an appeal, sir. Thank you, Dr. Laguju, for the excellent moderation. But I want to specially appeal to our distinguished guests. The last question you actually raised is very, very key. And I would like his take on it, because currently there is this ongoing conversation on the constitutional review. Should the state have control over their resources? In which case they will be in a position to develop them faster. Maybe the issue of delay in signing the CFO could be addressed, because the guest speaker said something, that even if you have the natural resources in the whole world and you are not able to take advantage of them, that the person will still, the country will be poor. So, sir, we will appreciate, because this is a good time for us actually to get maybe professional opinion on it. If we have these resources domiciled in a particular state, and it's being managed by the federal government, and then because of infighting between the federal and the state, there is no synergy in such a way as to exploit these natural resources. So the country will still be where it is. Sir, what will be your take? Should the state have control over their resources in order to facilitate economic development?
I think it boils down to all this federalism, or it is what the approach should be. And I think there's consensus is moving towards let states generate revenue and let them pay a percentage to the center. The reason I start with that is that, yes, Dr. Lagunju has identified some of the problems or whatever it is, which again we can solve with the sort of people you elect to go into those positions and all that. But I think if they have control, each one will work harder to generate the IGR they need to have and pay whatever need to go to the federal government. The incentive will be much more to do that. That's a rational and easy way of doing it. As long as you have controls in place and make sure that it's not open to unnecessary abuse, because the problem, don't forget what we're talking about, if the political institution at the state level is weak, the economic institution will always be organized in a way to benefit the political class. And therefore, what you're looking for, you will still not get. So you need to make sure that that is properly addressed. Otherwise, you may see situations where a lot of whoever is head of that state and his people are controlling all the minerals in that state. And whoever is in a different political party may not be able to access that. You have to know your people. You have to know and make sure that things are in place. Logically, it makes sense, but you need to think about what could happen. As accountants we say, when you go out, they say, look, you need to have dictate and preventive controls in place. You need to have things in place to make sure the things what could possibly go wrong, and say, what are the things that you have in place to make sure that they don't go wrong?
Well, thank you very much, sir, for offering your position on that issue. So my chairman, Madam Linda Onofeli, she's the chairman of ICSAN's Publicity and Advocacy Committee. It's over to you, please, for the word of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Lagunju. It's my pleasure this afternoon on behalf of ICSAN and the Publicity and Advocacy Committee to express our profound gratitude to everyone who has joined in the conversation and in making it worthwhile. I want to thank our esteemed president, Mr. Bode Ayeku, FCIS, for his exemplary leadership. And we say a big thank you to our erudite, cerebral guests, a two-time Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Mr. Segun Aganga, CON. Want to thank you, sir, for your incisive and enlightening perspectives. You have brought your perspectives to bear, and we are indeed better for it. We're grateful to our moderator, who happens to be my vice chairman, Dr. Waheed Olagunju, for the excellent delivery of his role as moderator in this occasion. We acknowledge the participation of our highly esteemed council members of ICSAN, and we thank all our participants herein, our ICSAN members of ICSAN, governance professionals everywhere who have joined, and members of the press. Thank you for your participation. I want to finally acknowledge the role of the Secretariat, ICSAN Secretariat, the Secretariat staff, and members of the Publicity and Advocacy Committee in conceiving and executing the conversation. This is the inaugural conversation, and we look forward to having more enlightening conversations. Thank you all, and God bless you.
Thank you, madam. So the good photograph, who is going to conduct that? Madam Registrar, is there anybody working on this?
Dr. Lagunju.
Okay.
Lagunju.
Okay, it's taken. All right. So
yes,
right.
It's taken. So it's national anthem now.
Okay then. Thank you.
So let's be standing for the national anthem. Arise, O patrons, Nigeria's call obey, to serve our father's land with love and strength and faith. The labors of our heroes past shall never be in vain. So serve with heart and mind, one nation born in freedom, peace and unity. Thank you. May God bless you all.
Thank you very much.
I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank